Here's something that's been bugging me. Psychologists have supervision, social workers have supervision, healthcare professionals have supervision. HR has LinkedIn. We spend our careers helping organisations navigate some of the most emotionally complex decisions they'll ever make. So why don't we have somewhere to stop, think, and make sense of the work ourselves? Last week at the People Unconference, I think I got a glimpse of what that might look like. Welcome to Hard at Work with me, Trina Sunday. This space is for HR leaders who care deeply about performance and equally deeply about people. For more than 25 years, I've been asking one persistent question. What are the real conditions for happiness at work? Because when humans come first, something deeper shifts. How people show up, how leaders decide, and how work feels. Here, we explore what it really takes to lead with courage, compassion, and clarity, and we pull up a chair to the conversations HR leaders don't always get to have. There's heart here, but there's also depth. If you're ready to build workplaces where people and performance thrive side by side, you're in the right place. Let's get to the heart of it. It's been a week since the People Unconference. I've shared the photos, I've thanked the speakers, I've celebrated what we created together, but I've realised that if I simply talked about punk as an event, I'd miss the biggest lesson of all. Because what happened that day wasn't just confirmation that the format worked. It challenged my own thinking. Over the past few months, I've been building something I've called the Hard at Work ecosystem. If you've seen the visual, you'll know that it maps 3 interconnected systems: the business ecosystem, the workplace ecosystem, and the societal ecosystem. And at the centre sits the human experience. Because that's what I've come to believe. Everything is connected. A decision made in the boardroom doesn't stay in the boardroom. It ripples through leadership, culture, teams, families, communities. People take work home, communities shape work, society shapes organisations, everything's connected. That's why I built the ecosystem. But standing in the room at Punk, watching nearly 60 experienced HR and business leaders think together, I realised something. I'd missed an ecosystem. The ecosystem of professionals. That wasn't an accident. In fact, it was exactly what Punk was designed to create. Not another conference, not another day of people sitting in rows, listening to experts before rushing back to work with a notebook full of ideas they'll never implement. Punk was intentionally designed around conversations. Conversations that challenge us, conversations that stretch us, conversations that help us think differently. Because I've come to believe something pretty simple. People rarely change because somebody stood on a stage. People change because another human being helps them see themselves differently. We began the day with, from me, a deeply personal story. It's a story that sits heavily with me because it reminds me and us that the decisions we make at work don't stay at work. They travel home, they shape confidence, relationships, health, identity, and sometimes they change the course of someone's life. That story wasn't intended to make people feel uncomfortable. It was intended to remind us why our work matters. Because somewhere along the way, I think many of us have been encouraged to see HR through the lens of policies and processes, compliance and risk, necessary things, important things, but they're not the reason that most of us chose this profession. Over the last 25 years, I've come to realise something that fundamentally changed how I see the role of HR. Every decision we make eventually lands in somebody's life. Every policy, every restructure, every leadership decision, every capability framework, every difficult conversation, every recruitment decision, every organisational change. They don't end when the meeting finishes or the document's signed. They ripple into people's confidence, their well-being, their families, their financial security, their sense of belonging, their future. That realisation became the inspiration for my hard work model. Not because the world needs another framework, but because I needed a way to articulate something that I've been observing for years. Organisations don't exist in isolation. People don't exist in isolation. Business decisions, they don't exist in isolation. Everything is connected. That's why at the centre of the Hard at Work ecosystem sits that human experience. Because HR doesn't simply shape organisations. We shape the human experience of work. And once you truly see that, it's impossible to look at your role in the same way ever again. Like at Punk, from there, Michelle Redfern challenged us to stop waiting for permission, to become the CEO of our own careers, to stop apologising for the value we bring, to own our influence. Not because someone gives it to us, but because we choose to exercise it. It wasn't a message about confidence, it was a message about responsibility. If we genuinely believe our work shapes people's lives, then we have a responsibility to use our influence more courageously, despite the corporate fuckery. Then came Kelly Swingler. Kelly challenged us to rethink burnout, not as a personal failure, but as a predictable outcome of systems and cultures that continually ask people to give more of themselves without creating the conditions for them to recover. And around the lunch tables, the conversation shifted. People stopped talking about organisations and they started talking about themselves, about the emotional load they carry, about holding space for everybody else's uncertainty while quietly managing their own, about being the person everyone comes to while wondering who they can go to. The night of Punk, Kelly sent me a message on LinkedIn and she said, 2 messages in my inbox already to say the session has helped them to see they're at burnout and they need to make some changes. You've saved some lives today and no doubt transformed others. I haven't stopped thinking about that, not because of what it says about Kelly, but because of what it says about our profession. If one honest conversation can help someone recognise that they're burning out, how many people are quietly carrying the same weight without ever having the opportunity to say it out loud? Then Dom Thurbon closed our day with what I think became one of the most challenging conversations for most of the people in the room, the idea of me truths. So he was talking about truth and honesty, and we knew that at the start of the day, people wanted to talk about honesty and courage and connection. And it's really easy for us to spend our careers identifying what's wrong with organisations, what's wrong with leaders, what's wrong with culture, what's wrong with HR, what's wrong with the system. But Dom challenged us to ask a much harder question. What's true about me? Where might I be contributing to the very thing that I'm trying to change? What beliefs am I holding on to? What behaviours am I repeating? Where have I become comfortable? Where have I stopped challenging myself? If my ambition is to become a courageous change maker redefining the future of work, what truth about me might be standing in the way? The question landed heavily, but insightfully, because the future of work won't be redefined simply by changing organisations. It will be redefined by leaders who are willing to continually examine themselves. Reflective practice isn't simply reflecting on organisations. It's reflecting on ourselves. And every speaker opened a different door. But the transformation didn't happen because people listened. It happened because they talked. Around tables, over coffee, walking between sessions, testing ideas, sharing stories, questioning assumptions, encouraging each other, sometimes disagreeing, often laughing, and occasionally admitting they didn't know. That was always the intention for me, because I didn't want people leaving inspired. I wanted them leaving changed. And the feedback that I've received over the past week tells me that that is exactly what happened. One attendee wrote, "The group session, understanding we all have the same challenges, has left me with some thinking to do." Another described the experience in just 3 words: affirming, grounding, inspiring. And one participant with more than 30 years in HR wrote something today that stopped me in my tracks. Punk was a deeper and more meaningful HR conference than I've ever experienced. It was a day of connection and community for me. HR can be hard. It's so important to develop an ecosystem of professionals who can bounce ideas off each other, support each other, and share our experiences and skills. An ecosystem of professionals. That phrase hasn't left me because I think it perfectly describes what our profession has been missing. Over the past week, I've found myself reading more and more about reflective practice. If you're a psychologist, social worker, or healthcare professional, this won't be a new concept. Reflective practice is a recognised part of professional development. Not because people aren't capable, because complex work deserves thoughtful reflection. The British Psychological Society has evaluated reflective practice groups and found that these groups aren't primarily designed to solve problems. They're designed to strengthen professional judgment. Participants consistently reported that the greatest value was not receiving advice. It was the dedicated time to slow down, to explore complexity, to hear different perspectives, to challenge assumptions, and to make sense of emotionally demanding work in a psychologically safe environment. And the researchers also found something that really resonated with me. Reflection helped people recognise the impact their work was having on them, not just the impact they were having on others. Like, think about that for a moment. How often do we, as HR leaders, stop to ask ourselves, what is this work doing to me? We're really good at asking how our work affects everyone else. We're much less practiced at reflecting on ourselves. And that showed up at Punk. And it's exactly why reflective practice matters. It's not therapy, it's not counselling, it's not performance management, it's disciplined thinking. It's creating intentional space between experience and action, so our next decision is wiser than our last. And as I read that research, I couldn't help but think, that's exactly what I watched happening around the tables at Punk. Perhaps we've become incredibly good at transferring knowledge. Courses, qualifications, books, podcasts, conferences. Knowledge matters. But knowledge isn't the same as wisdom. Wisdom develops through reflection, through challenge, through hearing another perspective, through somebody asking one question that changes how you see the problem. Perhaps that's what professional development's been missing. And when I designed the Hard at Work ecosystem, I wanted people to see that everything is connected. Now I think there's another connection to draw, because if we want healthier workplace ecosystems, we need healthier ecosystems for the people responsible for creating them. Not networking, not mentoring, not another breakfast event, an intentional ecosystem. Small circles of trusted professionals, confidential, facilitated, one real challenge, 90 minutes, no slides, no presentations, no selling, no LinkedIn posting. Just experienced people thinking together, learning together, supporting each other, helping each other make wiser decisions. And one of the Punk attendees who travelled from Kalgoorlie, afterwards she shared with me, when I get to come to something like Punk, I get to speak to people just like me. And for me, it was validation that my approach to HR makes more sense to our people, our bottom lines, and the communities we live in. Validation, community, connection. They're not nice to have. They're a part of the ecosystem. And in fact, it's already changed my own thinking. Like, I've been redesigning the next 10-week Game Changer HR Leader program because of the decision I've made to build structured, reflective practice into the experience. Not as an optional extra, but as a core element of the program. Yes, participants will learn new ideas and explore strategy, new thinking, influence leadership, commerciality, the future of HR. But just as importantly, they'll have a dedicated time to reflect, to challenge each other's thinking, and to unpack real organisational challenges, to ask better questions. Because after Punk, I am more convinced than ever that some of the most profound learning doesn't happen when someone gives us the answer. It happens when someone helps us to see ourselves and our work through a different lens. So perhaps the biggest insight from Punk wasn't actually about HR. It was about what happens when you intentionally create the conditions for courageous conversations, the conditions for trust, the conditions for reflection, the conditions for people to realise they don't have to carry this work alone. I've spent months talking with the team at Reimagine HR about workplace ecosystems. Maybe the next chapter of Hard at Work is about building an ecosystem for the people shaping those workplaces. Not a membership, not a product, but a movement. Because movements don't begin with answers. They begin when enough people realise they're asking the same question. So if this conversation resonated with you, and if you found yourself thinking, I wish I had a space like that, I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Visit trinasunday.com and send me a message. Tell me what reflective practice could look like for you. Because I don't think this movement should be designed solely by me. I think it should be built with our HR profession. It's hard work. Thanks for spending time with me. If this conversation challenged you, clarified something, or simply reminded you that you're not the only one holding the tension between people and performance, then it's done exactly what it was meant to. This work isn't easy, but it is necessary. HR has a new future, and it leads with heart. So if you found value here, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Share this episode with someone who also believes that work can be better. And if you want to go deeper, you can explore the Heartwork model, the programs, and the growing community of HR leaders at trinasunday.com. Because when HR leads with clarity, courage, and compassion, it doesn't just change workplaces, it changes lives. Until next time, keep asking better questions, keep backing your voice, and keep putting humanity at the centre of performance. Let's keep heart at work.